Podcasting. Anyone ever thought about having a podcast? Where do I start? Where do I begin? Here's a tip for you, something that I use, Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. It is absolutely free, and they provide all the creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer, phone, tablet, whatever device you have. It is super convenient, and Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you. Your podcast can be on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Grow your listeners and get as many people as possible to listen to your podcast. Everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Let's do it.
Shows are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Welcome to the Edventures in Tech podcast. Talking the latest tips and trends in educational technology to innovate and engage your students. Here are your hosts, Andrew and Dan.
Welcome to episode number 22 of the Edventures in Tech podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name's Andrew.
My name is Dan.
And we are super excited you are joining us on this venture. As always, if you like the content, please help us out by providing feedback and a rating on wherever you download your podcast from. We greatly appreciate your support. We also want to say, please share out the podcast. We're getting a lot of great feedback from people all over the world, and we do truly appreciate it. So before I go off the rails like I typically do, as Dan's already laughing at me, I'm not going to go off the rails, Dan. We're
Liar.
No, we're not going to do. I sit on a throne of lies.
Sit on a throne of lies.
You want to go to war? Anyways, I'm trying to stay focused, folks.
Okay, we can do this. Pull it together.
We are going to skip the Would You Rather this week, and we do. Really? Now you
really?
got me.
I get excited for it every week.
Okay, fine. I got one. Here we go. We're going to hit you quick with it. Would you rather attend Hogwarts or become a Jedi?
I would rather become a Jedi.
Yeah, okay. Me too.
I mean, hands down.
That's it. You know,
Absolutely.
It's kind of fitting. You know, the May 4th is coming up.
May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you is coming up rather quickly.
Which is also someone's birthday.
It is. It
Yes.
is. He who shall not be named.
Exactly.
We will protect the identity. He is in the witness protection program. Yeah, I think Jedi as well. But some people are big Harry Potter fans, so.
Yes, nothing wrong with Harry Potter.
Nothing wrong with Harry Potter, but I'd rather be hanging with Chewie.
And I'd rather have that Jedi mind trick
And a
down.
Wookiee, yeah. And just a lightsaber's badass. I'm sorry. So, anyway.
Is that going to affect our rating right there?
No, it's okay. Sorry. I'll bleep it out. No, I'm just kidding. Dan got too excited. His headphones came unplugged. He is literally unplugged now. All right. So we are going to skip classroom updates because we do have part 3 of something that we have been super excited about and teasing all along. But before we get into that, let's hit the weekly windup with news. Something that everybody has been waiting for in regards to the Google Sphere and Google Workspace is you can now set up your host controls and assign co-hosts ahead of meetings in Google Calendar. So basically, in addition to setting up your Google Meet breakout rooms in advance in Google Calendar, meeting organizers can now also turn those meeting safety features on or off, such as chat lock, present lock, and more. And you can delineate and designate your co-host before the meeting. So this will allow all those settings. Your meetings can flow more smoothly.
Yeah, I love this new update. Even though majority of us are not teaching remotely anymore, but we still are holding things remotely. I know we have a lot of, like college fairs and math carnivals and all these different things set up and showcases where, someone's in charge of scheduling all the connections and then having other people host. So this makes it super easy.
Yeah, and I want to say that Google Meet, Zoom, all of the virtual components that came out of the pandemic, that is one positive is that we're able to communicate and collaborate more without having to be in person. We didn't have that prior to the pandemic, so now that's a plus. You want to jump on a quick meeting with the teacher in between other things, especially in our roles or administrators' roles, they can meet with people at the drop of a dime, so it's great.
It is great. I love that we're having some experts come into a classroom tomorrow.
Exactly.
Just via Google Meet.
Yep, and we said no classroom updates, and Dan just failed. But anyways, moving on. The other thing I want to talk about is EdTech in 2025, a glimpse into the education's future. And this is from JotForm, Education, and really wanted to just kind of talk what we talk about technology becoming a more vital aspect of daily life. And not only does technology become part of our everyday life, it also becomes interconnected with education. So, and I think the misconception of EdTech being just a conversation about lesson planning, it's not. It's such a pivotal role in how teachers, admins, schools, everybody operates and how well students are prepared to succeed in a digital-first future. That's what we have to remember as educators, is we are teaching the future, and it's going to be the digital-first future, kind of like that next industrial revolution we talked about.
Right.
So,
and very relevant, that this coming out, looking at this as we get into the conversation that we're having later on in this podcast, it's pretty relevant.
Yeah.
Because we bring up those discussion points were brought up, and I'll have you guys just wait to hear what we have to say about that.
Yeah, we kind of touched base, and we had mentioned it previously about AR and VR and if it's ready for prime time or not.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right? I do think we're going to see how that evolves education within the next 3 school years, and where the EdTech companies go, and where it's going to kind of live in your classroom on a day-to-day basis, as we move forward. So, that being said, we are excited for part three of our conversation with Matt Miller. Now, the big thing with this week's episode and interview is Matt really delves in deep. I know we talked a lot about Tech Like a Pirate and his book in our last 2 episodes. However, this one we are talking about the EfficienTEACH. We're talking about education, post-pandemic, and a lot more without giving away too many, I don't want to spill the beans, so to speak. So here we go. Here's Matt Miller. Matt, thank you for your time. Once again, we greatly appreciate you joining Dan and I on the Adventures in Tech podcast. This is part 3. We've got a lot of people with bated breath waiting for this episode. We did have a full, lengthy discussion in regards to your most recent book. I don't want to say your most recent, but your most recently published book, right? We should say Tech Like a Pirate. So excited with, what has come out of that, all the ideas. It really came out at the perfect time, right when the pandemic started, and really gave those teachers, I don't want to say normalcy, but just those ideas that they can kind of do to engage their students right away. And now, Matt, before we get into the nitty gritty of everything, can you just briefly tell us the background for those who did not check out the first 2 episodes? Shame on them. But, and how you began your journey leveraging instructional technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Andrew, Dan, thanks again for having me back on the show. I always love getting to hang out with you guys. And I'm excited. I'm just as excited to get to come back. So I'm just pumped that some people are looking forward to it. So, but really a lot of this stuff has come right out of my own classroom. Teaching high school Spanish here in Indiana, I started out, I've kind of come through all these different iterations of technology in my classroom, from having my one teacher computer and access to a computer lab, to having a handful of computers and devices in my classroom, to having a cart parked in my room all the time, which practically made us 1-to-1, and all different versions in between and everything. So as far as the technology goes, I've been a techie guy and a gadget guy my whole life. I played on my Commodore 64 as a kid. I had a Palm Pilot as a college student. I actually got scolded by one of my professors once for taking notes on a Palm Pilot because he thought that it was not reliable as paper. And I'm like, okay, but I can access, and he wasn't hearing it, so it was just it's okay. It is what it is. But yeah, I've just throughout my entire career in education, from being a teacher to to doing professional development with teachers and stuff, I've just always been sort of super focused on what can the technology do to level up instruction and to level up learning. And that seems like such a simplistic look at it, but it's really sort of the heart, isn't it? Because we've all seen examples where technology has come into the classroom and everybody says, oh, it's the wave of the future. Oh, this is the kids' future. This is like what we need to be doing. We need to make sure that we're using technology. And then of course, we're looking at it from completely the wrong direction. So it's been my goal as a teacher to go, okay, we have this here. How can this technology here level up what it is that we're doing in class? Like, I've got these lessons that I'm going to be doing this week, next month. Like, can the technology that we've got heighten the experience? Can it level it up? Can it make it more efficient for kids to learn? Does it make it more memorable? Does it make it an experience? Like, I'm always looking for practical answers to that, and kind of like protocols and how-tos so that we can build that stuff out ourselves. And I was doing it myself in the classroom and wrote just tons of blog posts about examples that came right out of my class. And now that I'm doing it as professional development, it's like, this is my full-time job. I look at the technology that's out there. I look at what teachers are trying to accomplish, and I try to figure out how they can go together so that kids learn better. That's the big focus, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teachers would appreciate that. You're not just talking the talk, you've actually done the walk. So you've done it. So,
Very true.
you can relate to that. And they're like, okay, this is like concrete stuff that will work in the classroom.
Yeah, and that's my favorite stuff. Now that I do this on, now that this is my job, my favorite thing is to share ideas that teachers can use, and then see them showing up in classroom pictures on Twitter, where people have taken pictures of it in class and said, "Oh my gosh, this was great." Or I go to a school or a school district and I do a workshop, and they respond back to me and they say teachers were trying this out the very next day in class and they were loving it. Like, that's how I know that this stuff works. And that's a bar that I set for myself. Like, I don't want to just say, "Oh, go try this thing, and hopefully it'll work." Like, that's the stuff that I'm always shooting for.
And the one thing that you brought up in that I think is so important is the technology was secondary to the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's something that we always, it's just trying to get away from that bright shiny object and be like, oh, I can use this really cool tool, but where is it really going to get you? Am I going to spend like 45 minutes teaching a student how to use a tool when I can use something that they're comfortable with to get that outcome that I'm looking for? So we definitely do appreciate that. And I think the authenticity that you bring to the table is, great. And I think that's why you've been able to make such a connection with us and a connection with a lot of educators out there. So I know you've kind of alluded to it, but it's, something that we like to ask, and we always wonder. So if you can sum it up, like, with everything that you're doing, what is your why? I
Oh,
know
what is Yeah, that's a big question. My
it's a big
why.
question.
Yeah, yeah, and
So
that's one of the things, broadly, real quick, before I answer that question. One of the things I love about education and sort of the landscape that we've got now is that we have all of these different, you know, teachers in the classroom, and we have authors, and we have people that we can find on social media, and all of us have a different why. And it's like, whenever you put all of those whys together, there's somebody that resonates with you. If you're going to go look for someone who you need inspiration from, like, you can find a why that resonates with you. And that's what I love about our landscape right now. And a big part of my big focus is so much on doing great engaging instruction. Like, to me, what really fills me up is seeing a room full of kids and they get to do activities, or they get to do, self-driven learning or student-centered learning or something that is interesting, and you see them in the classroom buzzing about it, or leaving the classroom and talking about what they're doing in class. And it's not just, "Oh, we're going to go in and watch a movie. Oh, we're going to go in and play a game just for fun. And oh, I'm going to bring chips and salsa to class because kids like food." Like, no, this is the kind of stuff that that lights up the instruction, that turns it into something meaningful so that they can learn more efficiently, learn more effectively. The research shows that, the emotion and the sort of like the experience of learning and the effectiveness of it staying in the long term, all of that stuff goes hand in hand. So that's my big long-winded answer from what my why is that I want kids to be engaged in learning that's interesting to them, that's enjoyable, so that the teachers enjoy it and the students enjoy it. I mean, for goodness sake, we've got so many teachers that are dealing with burnout and are leaving
Yep.
the profession, and we need a little bit of love too. And we got into this education profession for a reason. We wanted to make a difference in kids' lives, and we wanted to help them learn, and we wanted to enjoy the process. And so, yeah, I want to do it for the students, but I also want to do it for the teachers, because there's some really good teachers out there that I don't want leaving the profession, because those kids need those teachers. So it's kind of a hand in hand thing. I think it's for the engagement and appreciation and enjoyment of learning for the students, but it's also for the teachers too.
Thank you. I wish our listeners could actually see your face as you were doing that, because you're talking about lighting up. Your face lit up and
Yeah.
showed how excited you were about it. So
You can tell, right?
I could
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to piggyback on that question, because you kind of led into something else we were looking for. You said, looking for people's why. Where do you look for? Where do you find your motivation? Where do you go out and look?
Yeah. My motivation as far as like what fuels that why that I just
Mhm.
elaborated on.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, for me, I've got 3 kids here at home. I've got a 6th grade boy, an 8th grade girl, and a 10th grade girl. And I see them go to school. And when we come back, I, I write about education. I train teachers. I provide resources on my website to help teachers teach. So, I'm all about instruction and education being done well. So I'm constantly asking them, what'd you do in school today? How did it go? How did you feel about it? That kind of stuff. And whenever I get really good responses to that, that encourages me. So I guess my why kind of is fueled personally for me by my kids, because I see the 3 of them at home and I realize that they're kind of like proxies for all of the rest of the children in schools all over the United States and all over the world. A parallel experience to this in some ways is happening in homes all over the world where kids go to school, kids come home, they've had an experience with it, they've actually had some meaningful learning or not happen. And a lot of that hinges on how the teacher prepares and how the teacher plans and how the teacher reacts to you know how the kids show up and what the assessment shows. And like a lot of that stuff hinges on the teacher, and that's a big responsibility. That's like
Yeah.
heavy stuff on our shoulders. And so I always figure, for me anyway, my why is understanding that teachers have to deal with that heavy weight on their shoulders every day. And man, they need somebody. If they could get somebody to help them out with that, that's what I'm all about. So yeah, I think for me it always hits home with my own 3 Miller kids that come home and tell me about school and tell me about what's going on and everything. And I want to do it for them so that if it works for them, there's a chance that it might work for others, and maybe it'll scale up.
I think that it's great in that sense that Dan and I are both dads as well. And you're right. You look for your kids. That's what we do a lot of things for.
Mhm.
So that really hits home. And I think that would hit home with a lot of the listeners as well. All right. So we know you have 5 books out, and we're curious as to where the whole idea of the EfficienTEACH has come from, the crowdsourcing, and kind of curious as to that.
I'm so happy that you asked me about this.
I love looking at that, just bringing it up every day or two and seeing everything that's been added to it and all those comments on the side of the doc. It's amazing.
Yeah. So here's where that all came from. Just over the last year or so, I've been looking at some, I'm just like anybody else. I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking for ideas. And so I've been diving into some, research and best practices and stuff, wading through some of the boring stuff that people don't like to sit down and look at. And I keep coming across all of these good research-based strategies for teaching that will help kids learn more effectively, but it doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of extra time. Like, you look at, I'm just going to pick one example here, like classroom makeovers. You see these, great big elaborate classroom makeovers where the teacher spent so much time, hanging things on the walls and getting costumes and making little cute things for every single kid and all of that stuff. And that has its benefits. But I also look at the trade-off for some of the things that we do in class like that take tons and tons of time for time-strapped teachers anyway. And I ask, like, how much impact does this have on learning? So I wanted to flip that script, and I
Sure.
wanted to go, what are the things that have huge impact on learning that don't take as much time? And so, the big focus of this EfficienTEACH project is to teach better and save time for what matters most. That's kind of like the slogan for it. And the idea behind it is basically this. I just decided it's me and Carly Mora, my blog editor at Ditch That Textbook. She's phenomenal. And so between the two of us, we've just been kind of like brainstorming a whole bunch of topics and ideas that all of these practices could fall under, and we wanted to just start sharing them. The big idea is, if we can get more of these, more of this research-based more of these research-based teaching practices that are powerful, that work, that can save teachers time and help them to do better work, maybe those burned out teachers will get some of that stuff and will have some more time so that they can go home and
Right.
relax.
Hmm.
So they can go home and do what matters to them, so they don't feel like their teaching job is all consuming over and over and over again all the time. And so, if anybody's curious about what we're talking about here, you can just go to EfficienTEACH.com. So it's like efficient, EACH, like efficient and
Yep.
teach, share the T. And it just takes you to a page on my website where it goes through all of these different topics that we're going to be sharing resources on and sharing teaching strategies on. So we've got like engaged students, communication, like how you communicate with students, but also how you communicate with their parents and guardians and loved ones, because if you get that support at home, that lifts up what happens in the classroom too. It goes all the way down to like memorization and long-term learning. How do you practice efficiently? How do you give feedback? Just all of that different stuff. And so the idea with this project is that we're going to gather all of this stuff. I'm approaching it as if I was approaching a book. It's almost like I'm writing a book,
Right.
but it's going on the website for free. So all you've got to do is really just go to EfficientTEACH.com, and you can go check out all of those resources, and see everything that we're creating. So the goal is to create a big, robust, comprehensive package of resources that teachers can access anytime, in hopes that those great teachers don't get burned out and are able to use some of this stuff so that they can continue on with this important work.
Right. So it's almost like an ebook. And, I was going to say, when is it published, finalized? I didn't know if you
Yeah.
were going into the book route, but essentially you just said it's going to live on off
Yeah.
of the website. Do you see it continuing to evolve annually, or are you going to have like a volume one, volume two? Like, how do you foresee this going as we move forward?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
We just kind of started it out as a big idea, and yeah, I mean, we're just sort of like taking it step by step right now, but I could see it being, like one spot that we continuously add stuff to it. I mean, really, the goal of this project is very much aligned with my why, I guess, like
Mhm.
Right.
my big picture. So it would be easy to continue adding things to it, because it's just what we do. So I could see something like this continually being added to for the foreseeable future, I guess. We'll
I
see, I guess.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I can definitely see it just existing.
Yes.
It's so organic that
Hmm.
it just exists, and that's just brilliant behind it, putting it out there. So thank you for that.
Hmm. Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to skip around on the questions a little bit, but it just made me think. Last time we spoke, because I was re-listening to that last podcast,
Hmm.
and we were talking, and we got into a conversation about maybe things that were overrated or not quite ready
Right.
for prime time in terms of educational technology. And it was funny, what you said was AR and VR. Um, at that point, you're like, "Oh, I'm not sure if that's ready yet."
Right.
So Andrew and I kind of took it as a challenge, like, what can we do? Is AR, VR ready for
Right.
prime time? And we really started experimenting in that field and coming up with some really cool things, but it is
Cool.
challenging. But just, thinking about that, what are your thoughts on where educational technology will be within the next 5 years?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, there's a lot of, okay, so I think where the vast majority of teachers in the classroom are is one place, and where you see people on the cutting edge and where you see some of the ed tech startup companies are is sometimes in another place.
Right.
And so we start to kind of like, I kind of see it. I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. It's almost like, okay, picture an aquarium, okay? And so in this aquarium, you have a little castle and you have, some like little trees and stuff like that. And as you fill the water up, some of that stuff is still kind of sticking above the water, right? I kind of feel like the water is like where the collective capacity is for the vast majority of teachers out there. And so you'll see some things like the castle that are reaching up out of the water, way up high out of the water, and we're not quite there. And it's good that they reach up there, and it's good that we stretch ourselves and we figure out where we could go. But I think that where the water level is right now is still very much, we're still trying to figure out. We're good with a Google Doc. We're good with a Google Doc. We're good with a set of Google Slides. We can do those presentations. We can do our email. We can do a Kahoot game. We can do Quizlet flashcards. There's a handful of those things that we're really good at. I think where we need to go next, and which is a little different than the question you asked, which is where do you see education technology in 5 years? I'm saying where we need to go, which is a little bit different, a little bit different answer. But I think where we need to go next is, surprise, surprise. This is what I was talking about at the open of this episode, is trying to figure out how all of that stuff supports great learning. So I'm actually working on a little resource right now for a group of teachers about using flashcards effectively, using like Quizlet flashcards effectively. And, flashcards don't seem like a very, sexy way of using technology in the classroom. It's not like super exciting, but the research still backs up the use, the systematic use of repetitions to build long-term memory, and long-term memory is still a big part. You've got to have that base of long-term memory before you can build upon it. And so I'm working with them to see how you can use it beyond just flip, 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 flip through the flashcards. Like, it builds upon, what cognitive science tells us about interleaving and spacing and, getting repetitions on the things that we need to work on and everything. Like, that's just an example of taking something that's like sort of basic foundational ed tech, but then adding what research tells us about what makes for lasting learning. So you know I think that we can continue to build upon those basic tech skills that I see a lot of people have, and then where do we go beyond that? Like, yeah, we know how to use slides, but and we can make slides to do presentations in the front of the class, but can we use slides in some of those great ways that edu protocols do, where we do something like Iron Chef, where we dice up the lesson and we have students gather information about it and then do little presentations about it. Can we create things like, little stop motion animations or choose your own adventures type stories on slides to create with what we're learning? I think that's what I hope in the next 5 years is the water level rising in the aquarium, to continue to push my very forced analogy there. That hopefully as that goes up, we'll be able to take some of those tools and take some of those basic skills and apply it. Um, where I think we actually will be, I hate to say this, is a little bit of the pessimist in me. I'm afraid that we're going to continue chasing the shiny, flashy new things. And so we're going to continue to see things come up that are like the castle in the aquarium, that are way up above where we really are. And we'll go, oh, look at the top of that castle. Oh, that's so cool. And we're going to go chase those things, but we don't have the rest of the base built in. And so I'm afraid that we're going to chase some of those shiny things that don't serve our students, or that don't have the impact on the kind of learning that we want to do, because we want to chase the shiny thing. So I know that was kind of like a long, convoluted answer to your question. Hopefully, I kind of touched on where you wanted to go on that.
No, it was great, and thank you for pivoting the question to where you think we should be.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely a better question. And as we think about, I think it does go back to what you said in the beginning of what the whole goal is for using the technology and getting its outcomes. It made me think of like, all right, where would I like to see everything happen in the next 5 years? And I would just, for me, I would love to see companies and things out there just start, not quite, but start putting more pieces together so you can blend different types of things into one area. Like Google Slides is great and Jamboard is great, and each has its advantage. But like if you really focus on how you can bring things together, so you can really harness student creativity and collaboration and be able to use multiple tools and multiple means of expression in one area and building up that capacity. I'd love to see more in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to kind of speak to that a little bit, I think with some of the third party tools, I've been so encouraged about how some of them really work together. Some of the ones that I've seen work together with other brands to create really nice integrations, like I think of like Wakelet and Pear Deck and Edpuzzle, and there's a variety of those. Screencastify has done some stuff like
Mhm.
that. I think, like, there's a handful of those third-party tools that, Flipgrid has done a whole bunch of stuff, especially when they got acquired by Microsoft.
Right.
They've started folding a lot of great Microsoft stuff into what they do, and they, connect with, Canva's another example of that. Like, yeah, when they all start working together, I think that encourages me with that vision that you just spoke of, Dan. Like if everything could kind of be folded together so that we don't have to piecemeal things together, and we don't have, when everybody's working together on the same team, so to speak, like that's super powerful. And I'm encouraged that, I'm seeing some of the company, not necessarily all of them, but some of the companies are starting to play well together. And I think that sort of leads in that direction a little bit.
Absolutely. One of the third party applications that I love is Moat.
Oh
And
yeah.
giving that audio feedback, I use that all the time. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
So we won't keep you too much longer,
that's okay.
but kind of thinking back on everything, because I know we have our thoughts on this as well, but we were just wondering what is your maybe biggest positive takeaway involving technology that came out of the pandemic?
Oh yeah, out of the pandemic. Okay. I think, big picture, one of the big things that I think came out of it, and I'll give the caveat that anybody does when we're talking about pandemic era teaching, that um I hate that, because my face just sort of lit up when you talked to I and that's the reason that we got to where we are now is terrible, and it's something that we certainly don't want to wish on anybody. But we did live through it, and we did get forced to do some things that we wouldn't do otherwise. And I think that big picture, the general big picture thing, is that we were kind of forced out of our comfort zone. And so now we have lots of teachers that will come back to more of a face-to-face setting, and they love the face-to-face setting, and they have a new appreciation for it when it was kind of taken away from them. But they also are going, during the pandemic, I tried X, Y, and Z, and I never would have tried them. X was terrible. I'll never do that again. But Y and Z were okay, and I actually kind of love Z. And so I'm going to continue to do that. And so, I think generally that's one of the big things that I think has been fantastic about it, is that we have been forced to try new things that are going to keep some of them. Now, what are some of thems, right? I've seen some teachers do, check-ins with their, like, little check-in surveys with their students, because whenever they weren't with them face to face, they couldn't see their body language and read their faces, and, get that little interaction on the way in to see, oh man, so-and-so's not having a good day. Oh, something's up with them. Something's wrong. I need to intervene in whatever way I can as a teacher. Um, so I started trying to do that with like little Google Forms check-ins, how are you doing and everything. And they started to hear from every single kid, and they heard things that they wouldn't hear otherwise. And so out of emergency remote teaching has come this great teaching practice of, let's check in with the kids every single day, or a couple times a week, or maybe once a week or something, so that we can hear some of those things that we just don't have the ability to ask every single kid every day. Like, you can't scale a teacher up to give all of that, face to face time with every single kid. That's one thing. And then I think also the use of some form of a back channel communication. When teachers were teaching over Zoom, one of the things I kept hearing was, I kind of love the Zoom chat. For some ways, I kind of love being able to hear from every single kid, and they don't have to put up their hand and answer out loud in front of the whole class, which is embarrassing and sometimes scary to do. It sort of empowered every kid's voice, and so now some teachers are using comments inside of a Google Doc, or they're using a tool like backchannelchat.com that lets them have a sort of like a chat window for everybody. There's a variety of different ways that I think teachers are using that, but those are a couple of specific things I think that came out of the pandemic that have sort of changed the way that we interact with kids face to face too.
Yeah, and I do think that the positives that it came out is our teachers' capacity has gone up tenfold, let's say.
Yeah.
And where you were going with, how we can actually use the tools and slides instead of just a presentation versus dicing it up and using it for student engagement. I believe you're right. That is the next level that we should get our colleagues to, instead of just using it as a tool to present the content or information that you're trying to do. So I think that's kind of great. Another positive that came out of the pandemic, and how we can now harness that knowledge that was consumed and push it to the next level.
And can I piggyback on that for just a second?
Sure.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because you said maybe that's the next thing that we can help our colleagues get to, is finding those sort of innovative, creative, different ways of using the same old tool. So I'm going to give a sort of a challenge to the people who provide professional development, because you see, I think if that's the vision, if that's where we want to go, then professional development has to change too. A lot of that tool centric, we were just talking about earlier. I was talking about Quizlet, because I'm doing some stuff on that right now. Like, okay, here's Quizlet. Let me give you some professional development about Quizlet. Here's how you make a flashcard. Here's how you make a class. Here's how you share the link to students. Okay, professional development done, class dismissed. And like, that's not going to help us level up our use of it. So I think professional development has to evolve as well. If we want practice inside of the classroom to change, then the professional development has to evolve to equip teachers with those meaningful ways to actually use those things. And even if we don't give them the, every single use case of this, okay, here's a tool, here are 3 ways that you can use it. But also, if you want to think of other ways to do it yourself, here's some things to consider. It's like that old proverb of, if you give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, then you feed him for a lifetime. Like, we need to be teaching teachers how to fish. And even if we're not teaching them exactly how to, we need to be like talking about the concept of fishing. And yeah, I'm pushing more analogies farther than they probably need to again. That's just what I do, I guess.
No, but you bring up a good point, and I think going remote and hybrid put teachers into that uncomfortable position where they may have heard about it all before, but now they really had to like rise and take the action and work in that digital environment.
Mhm.
And opened up their eyes to a lot of different things. I see, coming out of it, a lot of teachers have been able to really redesign their learning experiences, because they realize the power of like cloning their classrooms and doing all these things can create so many more opportunities for students, and putting more of focus on student creativity and student-centered classroom coming out of it. So that's definitely a positive. And from the professional development, like he said, all right, here's where we're going to teach you about Quizlet or whatever. I don't think we need to do that anymore. It's like, here's a short little video, or here's some animated GIFs, we'll put it into this will show you how to use the tool, but now let's talk about the process and the pedagogy. And I think we can have real conversations that way.
Yeah, it's like, instead of, you could replace that professional development about Quizlet by saying, okay, let's talk about retrieval practice. Let's talk about cognitive science. Let's talk about how to space out your practice so that forgetting becomes a part of the learning. Let's talk about interleaving, and about how if you mix things up, that's powerful. And oh, by the way, if you're using a tool like Quizlet, just pushing the shuffle button is a simple way that students can get more learning out of it. Like, in that case, we're talking about what we know about learning instead of just the tool. And it puts the emphasis on what's going to help the learning get better instead of the tool that we want to push on them for them to use.
Yeah, and shifting it from the mindset of having, okay, how do I use this tool, is how do I use this tool more effectively and efficiently? And
Yes.
that's the question where the value of PD comes in. And that's kind of gonna, spiral into where we're gonna discuss next, as we start to wrap things up, is we are very fortunate here in our district that we get to have Matt coming in person for a now
Yes.
it's an audio podcast, so you can't see Matt's reaction, but he literally just looked like Rocky conquering the steps,
Fist pumps and everything. Yes, exactly.
But we're excited that you're going to be coming to New York. Have you ever done a lot of stuff in New York?
A little bit up like Buffalo, Rochester, like that area. Not so much down where you all are, though.
Yeah. So Matt will
You're
be
in for
coming
a
to the
treat.
Hudson Valley. Oh yeah, yeah.
It's
So we're
beautiful
excited.
here. Not that we're biased or anything, but it's beautiful here.
Yeah.
We're excited that you're going to be joining us for a full day of professional development with good number of our educators. I'd say almost 65, 70% of them will be able to join us that day, teachers,
Yes.
teaching assistants. So it's going to be exciting. That's coming up for our professional development day. Do you have any, I don't want to say teasers, so to speak, Matt, but what do you want to just give them a little bit of what you're kind of planning?
Yes. 100% yes. So a couple of things that I'll get to do while I'm there. We're kicking this off with a keynote speech, I believe.
Yep.
And I'll tell you this: I take keynote speeches at school districts and conferences very seriously. That doesn't mean that they're serious, but I take them seriously in that I craft the experience very carefully. So there are going to be several surprises. I will bring a suitcase that has several costume changes in it. There will be props on the stage, and there's another like video worthy moment in like the first third to half of the speech that I'm not gonna spill on the podcast, but I'm just gonna say, yeah, there are gonna be some moments. This is a keynote speech that I've worked on for a couple of years now and continually trying to improve on it. But then when we get to do some of the like hands-on stuff together, all of the stuff I was talking about earlier about making it practical, having it based in research and what works and good practice and everything, but also having fun with it. That's going to be the big focus of all of it. So if you get to be in on some of my workshop sessions, my focus always is to equip you with things that you can use in the classroom like the very next day, that will put smiles on your students' faces and will level up learning. Like that's what it's all going to be about. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I am super pumped about this.
Oh, you said super pumped. I thought you were going to say super excited.
Oh yeah, that's right. Gosh, I need to dust that statement off and start using it again.
No, that's okay. I like super pumped as well. Everything's tying together, because we launched our first couple episodes with you calling you the Maverick Educator, right?
Yes.
And now it's coming out. That's it. So, we are super excited. We can say it there that you are coming, and we have a whole day with you. And I like how at the end we're bringing it all back together for a reflection for everybody, just to say, all the good vibes and all the good feels that come out of the professional development day.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's cool. And that's something that when I go to schools and school districts and stuff, a lot of times they don't do that reflection at the end, which is funny because everywhere that we've studied education and, what makes learning last, reflection's got to be a part of it. There's this quote that's attributed to John Dewey that says something to the effect of, we don't learn by doing, we learn by reflecting on doing. And so whenever we're able to reflect on it, that's what makes it stick. That's what makes it make meaning. And that doesn't just work for kids. That's like learning for humans, for human beings in general. And so getting a chance to do that and to go back over the things that were important to us and how we want to go forward, like that's just good, solid learning that we get to do as adults, as professionals.
Awesome. Dan, any final thoughts for Matt?
Nope. Just thank you for your time and for sharing everything, and definitely looking forward to you coming here in May.
Yes, me too. Thanks.
So that's going to wrap up this episode. Again, Matt, thank you so much. By the time this airs, it'll be just about 10 days away from your big appearance here in the Big Apple State. So we are excited by the time we push this out. It's teased perfectly, setting it up perfectly for a home run, and we can't wait to have you here in person. So Matt Miller, again, you can find him online at jmattmiller, at ditchthattextbook.com, and definitely check out all of his books. He's going to have all kinds of goodies when he comes here with us. So we're excited. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, guys. Really appreciate it.
Well, there it is. You heard it here first. Matt Miller will be coming to the Hudson Valley. Very excited to have Matt joining us at one of our professional development days coming up in May. We are excited that he will be joining us and a good chunk of our faculty and colleagues, administrators, support staff to teach and just really invigorate their style of teaching as we move forward in a one-to-one environment, specifically at our secondary schools. Lastly, sticker request. You want some swag? We will post it in the show notes. Any final thoughts, Dan?
Nope. Just want to thank Matt again for a wonderful interview and for him taking the time to talk with all of us. Really learned a lot from him and really got to see, a lot about what he was about and his motivations and where he sees things going.
And in one future episode, we will have a recap of Matt's presentations for the Professional Development Day, so that'll be great. Once again, thank you for all your support, listening on all the platforms, leaving us reviews. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please reach out. We'll talk to you soon. Tech hard, work smart, live in adventure.
Find Andrew on all socials at A Nicola Tech and Dan at WCSD Tech DR.